Benjamin, welcome. I'm excited to talk to you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time with me tonight.
Absolutely. So give us a little introduction to you. Who are you? What do you do? What do you write? Give us all the details.
So my name is Benjamin Sweeney. I'm a marketing professional with Clydebank Media. It's an independent publisher. We focus on nonfiction topics, and that's kind of my specialty. So I focus on nonfiction stuff, mostly in the business arena.
Nice, nice. And do you write about that topic as well?
Yeah, I've written a few titles for Clydebank Media. I'm also the co-author of our forthcoming digital marketing quick start guide. So we focus on business topics specifically for beginners, and I've worked on manuscripts that have turned into books. I've edited manuscripts, so I'm up to my knees in it for sure.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of experience to share. Thinking about maybe your writing process or maybe the writing process of some of your clients, but what are some of the struggles that authors encounter that maybe prevent them from getting started or prevent them from getting to that final draft?
Yeah, so like manuscripts can, you can feel like you're underwater very easily with the amount of work that you see ahead of you. It's you have a topic that you really like or you're really passionate about or that you've been assigned, and that finish line seems like it's so far away. Um, so I think that being kind of feeling like that finish line is really far away is the biggest challenge that I've experienced and that people that I've talked to have experienced. So it probably the best way to tackle that, in my experience, is to start with a really strong outline. If you really get those ideas, like the higher level ideas, some of those sub ideas that support that higher level idea, get it on paper. Really do your diligence there. It may not feel exciting to break down a creative process into like a structure, and not everybody's excited about that as a creative, but it really helps and it pays dividends down the line.
Mhm.
So getting that stuff on paper, and that outline can turn into kind of a rough draft as well if you really do a really robust job of setting those higher level topics, setting some of those subtopics. You can start writing right there, put your notes in there, put some of like your main ideas you want to tackle in there, and when you feel comfortable with that outline, when you feel like you've addressed some of those big points, you can start filling in the gaps. And it's even if you're somebody who's like, well, I don't like outlines, I don't like to feel structured, it really does help.
Mhm. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are becoming authors. They're taking their expertise and they're turning that into a book. And something that I hear a lot from them is, I know all of these things, right? I have 10 years of experience. I've worked with 100 clients, whatever that is. And I know what I want to talk about, but I don't know how to structure it together. So what advice would you give that person who has the knowledge, has the bits, but doesn't really know how to turn all of that into a book?
Yeah, it's really easy to like overshare or get lost in the weeds or kind of go off on tangents that reflect your experience and reflect the things that you're passionate about. And that passion, you don't want to lose that at all in the writing process because if that starts to dissipate, then people might not be interested in what you have to say. So bringing that passion is absolutely the right choice. But as you start to say, where do I start? What do I address? I think the most important thing is to put yourselves in the shoes of a reader, and from a business perspective. So you may know a lot about a topic, but pulling out those key points that a person who's new to the topic really wants to kind of ingest and kind of understand, and starting from there. So, you have, like you said, decades of experience, you have all these different client interactions, all this kind of work product to pull from. And then it can feel overwhelming. Start by saying, if someone is starting tomorrow, what's the first thing that I kind of learned that put me in the position for success? Pull that thing out. Maybe that's a top line level in that outline that becomes either a chapter heading or a subchapter heading. And thinking about it from that perspective of, I'm a person who's very new to this. I'm a person who has never done any of this before. Think about where you were at that point, and then pull those aspects out to become those chapter headings and to fill that outline out, because you're going to want the outline when you get writing. I mean, at the beginning, you're like, I'm still figuring things out, but when you're three-quarters of the way down the road, you'll really appreciate having done the work to build the outline.
So let's say I do that, right? I know all my stuff. I put it into this nice outline. Do I then have to start at chapter 1, or can I start at chapter 7 because that feels most exciting to me right now?
I mean, I've definitely hit a wall. I've definitely hit writer's block in the past. That's not fun and it's really discouraging and it can really kind of throw you out of whack. So starting where you're most comfortable, I mean, I've had projects that I've started and I've been like, this is a breeze. This is going really great. Like I'm not hitting any blocks. This is amazing. And then I've also had projects where I'm like, every step feels like it's a real slog. So picking wherever you're most comfortable starting anything to get to get moving, to get that momentum built is really important. So you don't have to start at chapter one, but it's important to know what you want to put in chapter one. It's important to pull those things out because you start in chapter seven, say, and you get a
Mhm.
lot of work done, and then it turns out 2 weeks down the line you're like, oh, I really wish I'd addressed X, Y, and Z. So it's really important to get that, to have that structure, and then you can kind of pick and pull from wherever you want. Having a really robust outline, you can fill in the gaps, and you say, "Oh, I'm just in the headspace of whatever I want to put in chapter seven." You can get that work done, and it gives you really the momentum to move on to other areas.
I kind of teach a lot of my students as well that there's this, I don't know how old it is, but I call it the old copywriting adage that you never want to start with the headline at the top of your page. You want to start kind of in the middle and then nail that headline at the end. And that's kind of what I teach my students as well, is your chapter one is the headline of your book. And so if you don't quite know exactly how that's going to fit together, or maybe it's going to get tweaked after you write chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, then it's okay to kind of come back and fill in those blanks. So I think that that kind of gives people permission not to be so rigorous in like one, then two, then three as they write their books.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Understanding what you want to say is really important, but I mean, don't ever be afraid to go back and say, here's my hook. Like maybe in chapter 10, whatever, you find the hook that you are going to put in the beginning of the introduction, chapter one, and don't yeah, have a robust outline, but don't ever let yourself be locked down by it because you can miss some creative opportunities that way for sure.
Absolutely. Changing direction slightly, what are some mindset shifts that you think are really important for aspiring authors to make to get through some of that, whether it's perfectionism or imposter syndrome or time management or some of those mental blocks that come up for people?
Huge aspect for me. I've been fortunate to be able to work with a team on many of the projects that I produce. So I know that when I send off work, someone's reviewing it, someone's editing it. But I've also found that mindset to be helpful when writing just either self-directed projects or projects where I'm beginning, middle, and end. To have to write with the confidence that it will be reviewed in the future, because you can get really bogged down in tweaking one sentence or one paragraph. You just get so focused on that paragraph, and you start to get into this headspace where it's like, I've hit this 15 times and it doesn't look right still, and that's all in your head. But in the moment, you don't realize that that's all in your head. So kind of thinking from a perspective of, I have the experience, I know what I want to say, getting it on the paper, and having the confidence to say, once I've hit period, I'm moving on to the next sentence. It doesn't matter what that last sentence looks like. Even if you're the person who's going to be reviewing it in the future, even if you don't have an editor, you don't have anyone like that who's going to be reviewing, even if you're just going to be the person reviewing it, say it will be addressed in the future. I have to move on. That's a huge that's been a huge benefit for me. And I think generally breaking down a manuscript into deliverables, even if it's like an artificial deadline, even if there's no like real deadline, just saying, um, all right, chapter seven is about this topic, and I want to finish that by Friday, get something together by Friday, and I want to move on to chapter eight or the other chapter that sparks my interest. I want to move on to that chapter, and I'll give myself 2 or 3 weeks to work on that based on my timeline. Just even if they're totally artificial, those deadlines can really help you focus on different aspects of the manuscript. So I've found kind of pretending that there's deliverables. I mean, sometimes there really are, and that can
Mhm.
have a motivating effect, and sometimes that's maybe not as motivating effect and kind of get in your head about that as well. But um, picking areas where you devote your attention, I think, has been really beneficial for me, and
Mhm.
beneficial to other authors that I've talked to as well.
Yeah. I've heard from a lot of my students that those artificial deadlines are kind of difficult for them because they're like, well, I could do it today, or I could push it off to next week. Like the world isn't going to explode if it isn't done by next week. And even if you have a hard deadline, the world is still not going to explode. So please don't put that
Sure,
much pressure on yourself. But
sure.
with those deadlines where you're only accountable to yourself, do you have any tips to make them feel a little more solid or make yourself more accountable to those deadlines?
Well, I mean, I when I say artificial deadline, I don't want it to make it sound like you really are being hard on yourself, because that's not how you're the most creative, and that's not how you're the most productive. When
Mm.
you really do have a penalty, right, for missing those deadlines. I think thinking about it more from a perspective of how I'm going to allot my focus and how I'm going to allot my create, saying, you know, I'm going to work on chapter 7 until Friday. And if I'm
Okay.
not happy with what it is, that's something I'll come back to. I am moving on to chapter 8 though. Or and I think that that kind of presenting yourself with a kind of a little bit of a respite from that one chapter, and saying I'm moving on to something else. You know, it's maybe it doesn't work for everybody. It's worked for me in the past. You know, obviously people. I don't think that setting yourself up to start to create these really high stakes situations with your own production schedule, I don't think that's going to help you. I don't think that's going to help somebody who's, especially somebody who's starting out and this is their first project. That's not going to
Mhm.
help you, because that really kind of sets you up into a position where you're maybe scared to write, or maybe you don't feel like you can do your best work. I mean, if you're in a position maybe where you're feeling like those deadlines are starting to set in, whether they're artificial that you created, or whether it's something that a client or a publisher or someone else has kind of put on you, don't ever feel afraid to step away. You know, even if it's just like a silly exercise where you just list all the things you did in the day, or all the things you've seen that week, or 15 things you remember from the last year. I mean, even if it's just something like that, that just kind of takes you away from the work that you're working on, keeps you in that creative mindset, keeps your mind agile, but doesn't kind of really like drill down those deadlines, artificial or otherwise.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I love
Stepping
that. I mean, I
away.
think, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was just saying stepping away, just to kind of wrap that up, stepping away, but not stepping away from writing, stepping away from the topic, so that you're still in that
Gotcha.
headspace, but that you're still in the headspace, but you're not, not beating yourself up
Right,
ultimately.
absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that bothers me the most in the writing and publishing industry is like, sit down and write for an hour a day, no matter what. Even if your house is on fire, like you have to sit down and write for an hour a day. And that advice, it forgets that it's a human doing the writing. Like you can
Right,
program a
right.
computer to press buttons for an hour a day, no problem, right? It's a computer. But life happens, and maybe your house does burn down. I hope not, but maybe it's
Yeah,
something you
yeah,
are like your kid
yeah,
got sick or something like that, where
yeah.
you have to understand life happens. And if you're so strict on those deadlines, like you were saying, that takes away that creative flow and that fun that translates into the quality of your writing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Uh, I wish we lived in a world where everyone had, kind of an infinite creative well, but and people do. I think people do, and they don't realize that so much. But it with everything that we do have to deal with, with our daily lives and with all these other kind of pressures, um, maybe that's not so obvious to people, or people have
Mhm.
heard things that say, you have to be a professional writer to be successful, or you have to go to school. It doesn't hurt, but those things aren't essential to being successful.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of the more people can say, maybe not be so hard on themselves, and find those spaces where they can step away, but not step away entirely, so that they
Mhm.
do keep up, because there is a grain of truth in that, write for an hour a day no matter what happens. Like, it's important to keep writing, it's important to stay in that mindset, and it's important to because everything has momentum. When you are writing, you gain momentum. When you're not writing, you gain momentum in not writing. So there's definitely something to be said for someone who says, maybe I'm not working on chapter 7, maybe I'm working on something else, but I'll just write. And, maybe if I hit 500 words of, nonsense, maybe just stream of consciousness, whatever, that's something to say, okay, if I can do that, I'm sure I can find 250 words in chapter 7,
Mhm.
so that kind of mindset, and staying on top of it, not being too hard on yourself. Um, yeah, and of course, these are tips for somebody who's struggling. If you're breezing through it and you're having a great time, like, that's awesome too. I don't want people to feel like writing is something that's, it's like, it's not like running a marathon. It's not it can be sometimes. And if that's the case, that's okay. But
Mhm.
if you're somebody who it comes naturally to and you're having a great time writing it, uh, that's awesome too. Like, that's great.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, Benjamin, I could talk to you for a very long time about this topic, just go on and on and on. But to wrap it up here, is there anything else you want to tell an aspiring author that's maybe having a bit of trouble getting their manuscript done?
I've had periods where I've had trouble getting my manuscript done, so I know what it feels like. I've tried a lot of different things, some helpful, some not so helpful. I'd say one thing that was like huge for me was, it's kind of a thing where I do have a not artificial, a very real deadline,
Mhm.
and I need to make some progress, and I'm just against a brick wall. One thing that really helped me, and it sounds very silly, but you take your document and you've got so first thing is get the document open. If just getting document open, you're already head and shoulders above where you were 10 minutes ago when you didn't have it open. So you got the document open and zoom in, like so that you can only see two sentences. Like
Mm.
the letters are like this big, two sentences, and you know what that sentence said, and you kind of know what you want the next sentence to say. So you put something down that's the next sentence, and you can't see what's above it anymore. Now you're really just focused on this one thing. And you're like, all right, I know what that sentence said. So let me move on to the next thing. I'll do one more sentence. And I kind of know what I wanted to say. I know what the last one said. Do that again. And it really, I mean, it was huge for me. It's not a cure all. It doesn't fix all of your problems, but it was really huge for me to really zoom in and look at it sentence by sentence and not just looking at the paragraph sentence by sentence, looking at it sentence by sentence. That was huge for me. Just um, saying like, okay, I can get one sentence done. Okay, I can get another one done because I know what the last one says. I know kind of what I want to say in the next one. And again, being like, I'll look at it in 2 weeks when I review this whole chapter. I just got to get this sentence done because I know what the last one was and I kind of know what this one wants to say. And then I do that. And then that's the only thing I'm looking at. And really, I mean, it sounds maybe silly, but really drilling down to that level where you're looking at one sentence on the screen at a time. If you're up against a brick wall, it can make a difference. That will
Yeah.
be my parting words.
I know. I love that. That's such a unique tip. I feel like that's going to be really helpful for people. So, thank you so much for your time. It was very helpful. I'm really excited to not only implement these tips in my own life, but have everyone else implement them as well. So, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me, and I really do. If 5 people use that, I'll be so happy. It helps them get
Absolutely.
over a brick wall.